Hey everybody, welcome to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, visionrecordingstudios.com, and here on my YouTube channel. And today we're going to do another look at a universal audio plugin. This week we're going to look at the DBX160 Compressor. This is a really cool, unique compressor. Has been a hardware staple in the analog world in most major studios for decades. This is a fantastic little compressor. And before we get into the DAW and listen to a few sound examples, let's take a look at the controls here on the front panel. So as you can see to the far left here, we have a threshold, and we have a dial for the threshold. And as you lower the threshold, you will see the signal will continue to flash the above LED right above on the right-hand side. And as the signal is below the threshold, it is going to light up the below LED. So you can kind of see when the signal's actually crossing the threshold point and starting to compress. To the right of the threshold, we have the compression knob or the compression dial, which is a ratio, anything from a 1 or 1-to-1 ratio up to a 20-to-1, which would be limiting. To the right of that, we have the output gain to make up for the volume reduction when you do compression. In the bottom left-hand corner, we have the power button in and out, and then directly in the middle, towards the bottom of the unit, we have the meter display selection, input, output, and gain reduction, and we will take a look at this in action in a second. So before we jump into the DAW, as always, I like to do a short little history lesson and facts section for all the universal audio plugins. This plugin, the DBX160, was developed by David Blacker in 1971. It is a solid-state VCA compressor. It uses a discrete set of components to give a unique set of non-linearities and characteristics, so meaning that the components that were used in the hardware unit and that are emulated in the software plugin have a unique character to itself, which is what makes the DBX160 a nice little special compressor, because it doesn't sound like anything else. And as you saw on the prior slide, it's a real simple compressor, real easy to use, simple controls. So let's take a jump into the DAW and take a look at the DBX160 in action. Okay, here we are in Studio One version 3, Studio One Professional, PreSonus Studio One, I should say. And we're going to take a look at the DBX160 on a few different sources. We're going to look at it on bass guitar, which is where I use it quite a bit. We're going to look at it or listen to it on an acoustic guitar, and then we're also going to listen to it on a drum bus, which is kind of cool. So the one thing that you notice right away about this particular plugin from Universal Audio is the GUI is very small, which is one of the things I don't like about it. The Waves company just released a version of this, which is a much bigger GUI, easier to use. Hopefully Universal Audio will redo this. This plugin's been around since the UAD1 platform, I believe. So the GUI's a little on the small side. Hopefully they're going to change that. I'll zoom in on the screen so you can see the controls here, because it is a little bit challenging to see if you're not zoomed in. So anyway, we're going to solo up a bass here. Okay, and we're going to turn this on. Okay, so instantly by turning it on, you can hear a little bit of thickness and denseness coming to the bass. And again, as you use the threshold, you can see the above light stays on all the time. You can see how much compression we're getting, almost 20 dB of compression, because the threshold is all the way lowered. And as I turn up the threshold, all the way to the other side, you can see there's no compression, and it says that the signal is below the threshold at this point. So the way to use this is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use our ratio. We'll do like a 4-to-1 ratio on the bass here. And we're just going to lower the threshold to get some compression happening here, and then we're going to use the output gain to make up the difference. And that's really about all there is on this compressor. So you can see we're starting to get some compression here. We're getting probably 5 dB of compression. Or we're kind of flashing between below and above, meaning the signal is dropping below the threshold and then coming above the threshold, which is allowing it to compress. So it's still leaving the bass somewhat dynamic. It's not completely crushing it, where it's completely compressing the signal the entire time. The more you lower that threshold, you can see it stays compressed most of the time. Oops. Before. after. So on this compressor, you notice right away we don't have an attack and release time, right? So all that is kind of dictated by the threshold. So the more you lower the threshold, and the more the signal crosses there, it kind of sets the how quickly you want to attack the signal is really by kind of gauging this above and below. Okay, if you want it to attack and kill the transient a little bit more, you're going to lower the threshold to constantly keep the signal above. It's going to clamp down right away. If you want a little bit slower attack, you're going to raise the threshold so the signal the compressor doesn't quite clamp down on the transient as quickly. And you can see there's no release. It's kind of a fixed release. And so that's what makes it really simple, a lot like an LA2. You just kind of dial it in and it just kind of works. Before. See how the bass kind of thins out a little bit? Now it thickens up. Okay, we can turn down the output gain a little bit if you want to match the levels a little bit better. Before. After. So on the bass, what it really does is when you take away the compressor, it kind of thins itself out a little bit. It thickens up a little bit when you're using the DBX160, and that's what makes this compressor kind of special, and it has a nice characteristic to it, which is unlike something like an LA2, which is a tube bass compressor. This is a VC. This is a solid state compressor, a little bit different sound characteristics. So that's on a bass guitar. Now let's take a listen to it on an acoustic guitar. We'll mute this. I'll turn this up so you can hear it. Kick in the compressor here. Let's go to like maybe a 4-to-1 ratio, or maybe even on an acoustic. Maybe we want to compress it a little bit more, especially when he hits those hard strums. Maybe we'll go to 6-to-1, 8-to-1, just to kind of play with it. Total compression. Before. So instantly you can hear that or listen for this, and I'll play it and won't talk for a few seconds here. Listen to the strum of that acoustic on the 1, where when he first hits that chord, you can hear that the transient really pops through the mix. Where when I use a little bit of compression, actually quite a bit, almost 10 dB of compression on the DBX160, you can hear how the acoustic performance smooths itself out and it's a lot more even. The thing about strummed acoustic guitars, it's extremely dynamic. And so by using the DBX160, we can compress that to make that performance a little more even. Now you're still going to hear the transients come through a little bit, and it's not going to be completely linear. There's going to be some dynamics there, but it's going to sound a lot more smooth. It's not going to be this big, heavy hit on the 1 where it's going to poke through the mix. So let me, I'll start with it off. I'll play the passage once, and then I'll play it again with the compressor on. So listen to this whole passage. And listen to how heavy the strumming comes in on the 1. This is before. Compressed. So a lot more even on those real heavy hits, which is kind of nice. And we're compressing quite a bit here. So this is something you would experiment with. Maybe that might be a little too much compression for your liking, so you just dial back the threshold a little. Okay, so that's on an acoustic guitar. And again, we would be doing this in the context of a mix when we were kind of dialing this in. But for this purpose and for demonstration purposes, I want you to hear the difference before and after quite obvious. So that's why we're soloing up instruments. So now let's take a listen to this on just a drum bus. Use a stereo version of this. And we're just going to do kick, snare, overheads, room. Go down to our drum bus. See what it kind of does there. Okay, so on the drum bus, I'm going to do like a 2-to-1 ratio. I'm not going to try to squash it too much, and we're just going to, for that kick and the snare, as the snare and the kick kind of hit, you want to kind of see the above light kind of flicker on subtly. We're only going to get a couple of dB of compression. Couple of dB before. Here how the kick drum really comes forward and the snare just gets a little bit thicker. Before. Before. Okay, so that's the DBX160 by Universal Audio. Real simple compressor. Again, has a little bit different sound than maybe some of the other compressors that we looked at before. And you know, one thing you got to keep in mind when we talk about these vintage style plugins and we start looking at, you know, 1176s, the DBX160, the LA2, the LA2A, the Fairchild, all these different types of vintage compressors, they all do the same thing, but they all have a slightly different sound. So as you start to compile some of your different compressors and you start auditioning them on the same sound element, you're going to hear that there's some different characteristics about each one. This is a solid state VCA compressor, which is a different sound characteristic than say an LA2A. Okay, it's got a little bit more of a feel like an 1176, but 1176, you have attack and release settings. There's some different things you can do to get some different tonal options. And so this is a great compressor to have in your toolbox. It's not something, again, that I use all the time, but I use this a lot on bass. I use it sometimes on things like acoustic instruments, and it really does a nice job. So this was kind of a quick one, but this is the DBX160 Compressor Limiter by Universal Audio. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions regarding this, you can always email me through my website at homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and check out homerecordingmadeeasy.com for more training tips, concepts, techniques, and training. And if you want to learn more about my mixing and mastering services and so on and so forth, yada, 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 go over to visionrecordingstudios.com. And until next time with another Universal Audio plugin review, this is David Vignola from homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and I will talk to you guys all soon. Take care.